Greetings, and Eric the Racket Scientist here. So here I have my next racket that I promised you in the last video. If you watched any of my last couple videos, you'll know that I traveled to Europe, specifically Switzerland, and I took that opportunity to kind of look for some racket brands that may not be available necessarily in Asia or North America. And in my last video did a Babolat racket, which, Babolat, popular tennis brand, but they also make badminton rackets. But perhaps the more famous European brand is Forza, which is a Danish brand. And, obviously a lot of the Danish pro players have used Forza in the past. So I definitely wanted to go look for and pick one up, one of those Forza rackets. I did find one, and just as a recap, I found a shop in Switzerland in the city of Winterthur named racketshop.ch, which, I guess I should link that in the description as well. And nice little gym there with a shop that had a wide variety of products, and it had both the Forza and Babolat rackets that I was looking for. And so here I have today this Forza HT Precision 88S V2. Now I know that's kind of a mouthful, so I guess we'll go one by one. HT Precision, I think those terms go together, and I think that's just their control lineup. So, when it goes for their control rackets, the power rackets are pretty heavy. As far as I've seen for the European brands, they don't tend to commonly do the thing where like the same racket model comes in both 4U and 3U. Like if a racket's just 3U, it's just 3U, or if it's just 4U, it's 4U. Rather, they all have like a specific weight. Like this one just says 86 grams. So like this model is going to be 86 grams. And the reason I didn't get a power racket is because a lot of the European brand power rackets, they just tend to be heavy, right? Like they're head heavy, but they're also just heavy, like, 88 grams or something, which is towards the middle, higher end of 3U, but 86 is like kind of the low end of 3U. So I was like, okay, that's fine. In general, I find control rackets to be the safest bet when buying from new brands, just because like speed rackets, they can be, really fast, but, they can sometimes be really like stiff or have some vibration just because there's not enough like dampening material or head weight, and they lose some stability. And then again, power rackets can be fun as well, but especially in the case of these European brands, they could just be very heavy or demanding. And so usually kind of control or, middle of ground rackets tend to be a pretty safe bet. So this is 86 grams, and I think, it claims to be medium balance, but it feels pretty solid in the hand. It could be, but we'll measure it. Actually, I guess it could be. I've also heard that Forza rackets tend to be or feel quite stiff, so I wanted to be conservative there. This is made in Taiwan, which, was kind of funny. When I was in Taiwan, I looked for Forza rackets, and I found some budget ones, but I didn't, find the high-end models. And it's kind of funny that it kind of goes to Europe without being sold there. But I understand. I think, there's not really a market for Taiwanese people to buy these. I think one thing I do like about Forza specifically in terms of their brand and their model is their naming schema. I think a lot of people can complain about naming schemas of rackets, like what do the numbers mean or whatever. I think there are some brands that kind of subscribe to the whole higher number is better thing, like we know from both Yonex and Li Ning do the thing where it's like, they kind of start at 7, the number 7 for like high-end models, and then there's 7, there's 8, there's 9. 700, 7,000, 800, 8,000, 9, whatever. There's some brands like Mizuno that just use single digit numbers, like, it's like acro speed, 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever. And in the Mizuno case, the lower end ones are the higher numbers, so it's kind of reverse there. We don't have that here, but what we do have is a clear indication of some of the racket specifications. Yeah, we have a clear indication of some of the racket specs in the name, specifically the 88S. And I think this is funny because, Yonex has an 88S, but it means something completely different here. The 88 refers to the number of grommets, and then the S refers to the stiffness level. So it's like, as far as I know, maybe at least for the precision line, it's like this. But and then it makes it pretty easy because when you buy the racket, then you would know exactly how many grommet holes there are and how stiff the racket is. And I suppose the balance and stiffness just kind of belong to the racket line itself. So that brings up an interesting point, which is that most racket brands and most typical rackets, 72 and 76 hole patterns are probably the most common. Maybe sometimes you get 80 hole patterns, but I think Forza is known for having these crazy patterns in some of their lines, not all of them. I did a little bit of research before I bought this, and some of their lines have pretty standard 76, 80 hole patterns. But for example, this Precision line, they have this 88 hole pattern, which is more than usual. That means that so 76 is your standard, what is it, 21 by 21? Don't quote me on that. And 76 is when you have single pass corner holes and then shared holes on the bottom. 72 is when all the corner holes are shared. And then 80 is when all the corner holes are not shared. And so 88 is like we have 2 extra mains and crosses, so that gives us 8 extra holes, 2 for each, and then that's how we end up there. And if you think that wasn't enough, there's a 92 hole pattern, which is even crazier to me. 92 is a lot, and I talked a little bit with my stringer Sean about that, and he's like, yeah, at a certain point, like, yes, you can get a really firm string bed from doing that, but at a certain point you also start to compromise the structural integrity of the frame, because with so many holes, you poke holes in a frame, you kind of there's less material, less structure to hold up, more weaknesses. So that's kind of unfortunate. So I think similar models, there's also an 88M, so that would be the 88 hole pattern, but with like a medium stiffness. And I was a little concerned about the 88S, the stiff, because I heard, Forza rackets are pretty stiff. There's another stiffness level above that. There's very stiff, which is, I'm just going to show you this here on the shaft. You have all the measurements. It shows you all the possible measurements. So for flex, it's F for flexible, M for medium, S for stiff, and VS for very stiff. So this is stiff. It's not the highest setting. But after I kind of held it in hand in the shop, I was like, okay, this doesn't feel too, it's stiff for sure, but it's not that bad. So I decided S would be fine, and I didn't need to go for the M model. Now, 88, 92 holes, yeah, I I would admit that like the 88 hole is definitely going to be the more approachable one because it's got um, 12 more holes than like a standard 76, but like that's like a good middle ground, I guess, between that and the 92. But I actually did want to pick up the 92 just because for the novelty, just because like that's crazy. That's like so many. Like that's so many holes, and I just kind of want to know how it feels, even if I hate it. That's the kind of guy I am, right? It's like I like the weird stuff. I like experiencing racket technology and stuff. But unfortunately, when I visited the shop, they did not have any 92 hole models there. They did have a couple 88S models, which is why I ended up getting it, which is fine. I'm okay with that. And depending on how I feel, if this is like, if I use this and it's like, oh, this is like way too much, then yeah, I don't know if the 92 hole model would be any better. But it's fun to think about, buying it and using it, and if I were to find that, I might pick it up eventually. Oops. Now you may have noticed, I don't know if how many of you guys know what the Forza model or Forza logo looks like. But it's just an FZ. So this obviously is not the Forza logo. This one was pre-strung. Apparently the shop had strung it. Most if you're buying, Yonex, Victor, Mizuno, like any kind of high-end brand Asian racket, the high-end rackets basically never come with strings. I think we're all pretty used to that. And I mentioned the other video with the Babolat racket. I noticed that the European brands, they do pre-string their rackets, which is interesting. And when I say pre-string, I don't mean like this. I mean like they come with stock strings, kind of like you would expect a Yonex like tour, or not tour, like the game or play models that come with like, the really crappy strings. Kind of like that, which I thought was kind of interesting. Because, I think most of us know that if you're going to get a high-end racket, you would just string it to your own specifications. But for the European rackets, even the high-end models, like this is considered a high-end model, they all do come with stock strings. So not really sure. And I was saying in my Babolat video that I think the logic there is just that, like, yeah, maybe they're shitty, but like even if it's most people buying that racket are going to be advanced players and they'll restring anyways. But on the off chance a beginner, intermediate, someone entry level wants to use the racket, even if they shouldn't, like, they are going to do that. Sometimes people do that all the time. You see people who are getting into the sport immediately going and buying like 100cc. That does happen. So if that sort of person does buy the racket, then yeah, they have strings to play with, even though they're terrible strings. So that could be the logic there. Yeah, so on that note, yeah, the shop strung this one, I guess, just ahead of time in case any customer wanted it, and I guess the customer was me, so I guess I kind of got a free string job for this. Although it is, I think it's BG65. Yeah, which is fine. It might actually be a good thing just because the string bed is going to be a lot firmer than I am used to. So, 65 is pretty soft and durable, so I won't break it super early, but it might also just feel like a trampoline, which is fine. So I don't know, it could be, I'm thinking about whether I should go with my normal tension, go like a little bit lower, since 88 hole grommet, that's a lot. Oh, the other bad thing, you just use up more string. So like, if I have my reel and, if you're really conservative and you use like, is it like 2-knot stringing? Like you can usually, I think it was like you can get like 22 stringings out of a reel max, whereas if you use 4-knot the whole time and have a little bit of waste, then maybe, you usually you can get like 20. So stringing this bad boy is going to use up more. A couple other things I noticed about some of the European models I looked at and the ones that I bought, they don't seem to be. I think this is also just like different demographic, different like target demographic, and different like these are still designed. Like this still says it's designed in Denmark, and the Babolat still is designed in France. So like they're designed in the West as well. And even if they end up being manufactured in Asia, the design philosophy I think ends up being a little bit different there. And you can see, or at least I noticed, that these rackets aren't really following the trend of like, super short shaft and like a compact head. Well, the other the Babolat racket I had a pretty small head, but this is like a kind of a largest one. But Forza clearly is doing its own thing with like its hole patterns and stuff. They seem fairly convinced that like number of holes, grommet holes is what's the word, correlated with power actually. That's something that none of the Asian brands really subscribe to. I don't know if that's necessarily true either. If you have less holes, we saw Yonex do their 68 hole pattern some time ago. You get more hold time with that, and you're able to get the strings to flex more, so you get easier power. But then we kind of just end up back at the debate of like what gives you more power, high tension or low tension, right? And that's just like a kind of a big clown show there. You have people coming and being like, oh yeah, I got to use high tension because that's what the pros use. And the people who say that usually don't really have good form or anything. And then you have people who are like, oh yeah, lower tension means that you can access the power more easily, so it's more powerful. Yeah, there's kind of truth in all of that, really. But you should, at the end of the day, from a recreational play standpoint, even if you're like kind of recreational but like compete, kind of like I do, you should really just gauge it based on what feels good to play with. And that can mean something different from everybody. Some people like the feeling of the contact sinking into your strings more, like lower tension. And like theoretically you lose control at the net and whatever. But like you can learn to control it. So if that's what you prefer, then yeah, more power to you. Conversely, high tension, yeah, you could argue, yeah, you get way more control from that, and that or the way I put it is that the power ceiling is higher, like the potential for the strings to flex and rebound is higher there, and to a certain point. But it obviously places way more strain on your arm. You get more impact. It feels overall just very much harder. You have to have a much better conditioned shoulder, wrist, everything. And, to be honest, most of us who don't train regularly or are just not very physically strong as pros, which most of us aren't because they train every single day. That's their job. We aren't built for that, which is why we don't do that. I have used rackets 30 pounds and up before, and yeah, it feels good, and it's kind of fun to use for a little bit, but I would never use that for daily play. You don't really need to. So shout out to the guy on Facebook Marketplace who's like messaging me about this racket I was selling and was like, what's the maximum tension of this racket? And then proceeded to say how he wanted to string at 34 pounds for more power. Yeah, so. So I wonder how that's working out for him. Well, that adhesive came off much more easily than the one in my Babolat racket video. I trimmed it so it wouldn't be as long, but the handle on the Babolat racket was kind of a nightmare. I ended up cutting out a lot of it. So I was just kind of heads down. And this was fine. As you could see, I peeled it all off with my hand. That's always good when you can do that. I also did notice that kind of some of the European brands to some extent don't subscribe to the whole same grip size, G4, G5, G6, which is understandable because it's, again, with the weight class, the whole idea of like the number going up even though the grip is smaller is like kind of weird and unintuitive. I do know that at least on their website, Babolat has their grip sizes as just G1 and G2. That being said, some standardization would be nice because I would definitely want to know if I was accidentally buying a G4 grip racket, which could very much be possible as those darn Europeans have their big masculine hands, and here's me with my small Asian hands. Clearly genetic difference there. What's the term the Zoomers are using? Demure or whatever? Yeah, small demure Asian hands. It's kind of funny how this gripping process affects my perception of the racket, because it happens sometimes that there's a racket I'm really excited about and then it just turns out to be a huge pain in the ass to prepare and clean up the way that I want it to. And then I kind of just, roll my eyes and I'm like, that was annoying. But then sometimes there's a racket that, that I don't care so much about, but then it's way easier, or I noticed some nice touches or whatever. Pretty nice wood in the handles, by the way, of both this and the Babolat racket. Again, I don't know if it's due to the manufacturing region. They claim to be made in China and Taiwan, respectively. So I'm sure that means the upper part of the racket is manufactured there. But the question for me remains whether the final product or the painting is done in those factories. The final assembly, is done in those factories, including the sourcing and assembly of the wooden handle, because, as I've said previously, of all parts of the racket, the wood handle makes the least amount of sense to ship. and it makes the most amount of sense to source locally. So you can really, and we know that at least in Europe, there's a lot of good timber. So you get some pretty good quality wood there. And one of these days, I think what would be a really cool experiment would be making a racket with a handle that just has like a really fine wood for no reason. You know, like just make a badminton racket that has a handle made out of, you know, hard rock maple or like mahogany. I think that would be pretty hilarious, to be honest. Got another free grip laying around, although I am using up my super grap at a pretty good rate. I think that wheel is going to be finished soon. Do I have another wheel? Well, we got another free grip for now. So I guess this means this handle is definitely on the shorter side, at least by modern standards. Yeah, it does. Okay. I feel like my instincts tells me that this stock grip was pretty heavy. It definitely feels a lot lighter now. But at any rate, I'm excited to play with this. We'll see how it feels with the BG65, and I think it's a little lower tension than I normally would. But again, denser string bed, so it might feel fine. If not, then I'll just range string it. Oh, sorry, last quirk. I was gonna say, so this frame is this kind of a sword arrow frame, mostly recessed, but not fully. One thing that might be hard to see on camera is that the sword part of the frame is a little wavy. Now, if you look really closely, you can probably see it. It's not super noticeable. And I've seen this before on one other racket line, and that would be the Gosen Inferno line. If you're familiar with that line, you'll know that that's very wavy, actually more wavy than this. But they say that it's supposed to increase structural rigidity and integrity while kind of maintaining that sword frame, and that's what Gosen says. So I imagine that that's the same goal here. So yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to mention. And anyways, excited to use this. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.